What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Welcome back to Dylan Talks Tone. Welcome to the Just Gonna Say It podcast every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Almost didn't happen today because I dropped my car off at the dealership for the 40,000 mile service, and it took way longer. In fact, they just had to give me a car to drive home. I was like, hey guys, I have a podcast at 4 o'clock and I can't be late. So they had to give me a much slower Audi to drive for the evening so we could get back here and do this just in time. So I have been running my butt off to get here and hang out with you. So here we are. Everybody, this is ad free. We don't turn the ads on until after the live stream is over with. We also upload these to their other podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, all those. So if you want to support the channel, you can use a super chat. You can use a super thanks afterwards. You can buy pickups. We have some really cool stuff on our drop page this week. And wait till you see what I got coming Saturday. Working on some really neat stuff. So that's pretty cool. I was working on that today. Also, if you don't want to spend any money at all, do me a favor and just hit the subscribe button and the like button and share this video with somebody. You should subscribe because right over there just came in literally like 40 minutes ago, the Spark 2. So I got a new Spark 2. It's in the box. Haven't even touched it. Like, I kicked it out of the doorway so we could come in and out, but it's just sitting right there. Haven't even touched it. Haven't even looked at it. Haven't even read the words on the outside of the box. I just know it's a Spark 2 because I want to share that with you live tomorrow. We're going to actually unbox that thing live tomorrow on the YouTubes. So let's get into today's subject. So let me tell you where this is coming from. The podcast title, something about why are these guitars so much more expensive? Why is my audio not right? Hang on. Sounds like crap probably. Sorry, hang on one second. It sounds amazing in my headphones, but you're not hearing that. I'm having a problem with a cable is what it is. Come on. You ever have that issue where you like run over really work as well anymore? That's kind of what happened here. And I want to fix this really fast. Sorry. There we go. All right. Okay, so now it should sound better. That sounds better already. I can tell that it looks like it sounds better because of what I see on the screen. Volume is low. Yeah, it was. Sorry about that, everybody. I apologize for the situation. Anyway, did you purchase the Spark 2 battery? No, actually, one of you on Patreon bought this and had it sent here so that we could look at it, and then I'm just going to send it on to them when I'm done with it. So I know nothing about this. I read about it, heard about it a little bit, and that's all I know. So I know nothing about it. I'm going to share it with you for the first time tomorrow. So I've been looking at a bunch of stuff over the last few weeks with regard to Dylan Talks Tone, because obviously as prices continue to rise, we're trying to figure out ways to make sure, like, I haven't raised prices in 3 years, something like that, maybe longer. And I hate doing it. But stuff is expensive. Like, everything is expensive. Like, stuff is just getting way more expensive. Magnets are more expensive. Copper is it's really weird. You would think that would be more expensive, but it's not. But all the other materials are getting more expensive. Anything nickel, oh my gosh. So base plates, covers, all that stuff, wicked expensive. So we're trying to figure out ways. And so I'm trying to, basically, I'm buying, and we're really busy. So instead of just buying from some of the normal suppliers that you may think of, so, I don't buy anything from StewMac for this stuff, but, you think of the normal suppliers, StewMac, Mojo Tone, I don't know, various places like that, who you might think that a pickup builder would buy parts from. And I have bought stuff from Mojo Tone, but I'm like, okay, I need to figure out where they get this stuff, and I need to start getting my own stuff. So we actually, about a year ago, started importing our own magnets, for example. We don't buy our magnets from Mojo Tone anymore. We buy them from Mojo. We don't buy them from Mojo Tone because I buy them from where they get their stuff from. And so I'm starting to do some of that stuff with more things. Talk about how guitars more than $1,500 are a scam, slightly better pickups and locking. You are in for a rude awakening, my friend, because we are going to talk about some stuff that's going to blow your mind. So I've been doing a bunch of research on cost of parts. I've been doing a bunch of research on origins of parts. And then, of course, I always talk about this little bird that tells me stuff, that I've got this guy that I talk to who knows things because he buys parts for all of the big companies, etc. Well, while I was waiting on my Audi today, I had about an hour-long conversation with him, and he told me some stuff today that I had no idea about. I mean, I knew I kind of had an idea, but then he told me some stuff totally blew my mind. Had no idea at all. So when we start to look at this stuff, it's interesting. I think I said this in a podcast last week or the week before that, guitars are not a commodity, right? They're a luxury. So this is not food. This is not shelter. This is not fuel. So this is not a commodity. These are luxury items. None of us actually need them, right? And like I mentioned last week, we could make an argument for mental health. We could definitely make an argument for that. And I respect that. But when it really comes down to it, these are luxury items, and none of us need them. So for people to think that they should be entitled to a guitar that only costs X amount of dollars and everything else is unnecessary is just stupid. It's just totally uninformed and makes no sense. And so as I'm doing this research for this podcast, because I've been doing it for myself for the company, but then also for this podcast, I really dove into it. And I started to look at things like, and this is all stuff you can find too. This is at the beginning stuff here. I'm going to give you stuff that you can find this anywhere. Okay. And it's pretty simple, easy to find. Okay. Let's take a volume pot, for example. The CTS pots that we use and the CTS pots that are in expensive guitars, like custom shop guitars, good American guitars, like really good stuff, okay? They're about 10 times the cost of the little cheap ones in cheap import guitars. And we're talking about at volume here. Now, we're not talking about what you can get them for on Amazon or so we're talking about at volume, okay? Because I have access, because of what I've been doing, to the volume. Like I can buy the stuff from where it comes from, not from middleman. And you can start to look at, let's just say their cost prices lists that I get aren't a catalog, right? They're literally like an Excel spreadsheet. And I can go, okay, I need this part number and I need this many of them. And if I wanted to buy 5,000 of them, this is how much it would cost, right? So when we start to look at it, we're not going to talk about specifics and prices here, but we're going to talk about the delta between a cost-cutting guitar and the mentality behind that the brands have, which I learned about today, had no idea. So I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But really, we want to look at the delta between, okay? So we're not talking about a $500 guitar, a $200 guitar, a $1,000 guitar. We're just talking about the delta between the cheap parts that go in a guitar and the good parts that go in a good guitar, okay? Probably about 10 times the price for one of those little cheap pots that go in a, Epiphone or something. Not the good Epiphones, but like the, Harley Benton, Firefly, like that kind of stuff, okay? We're talking 10 times. Switches, same thing, 10 times. Pickups, we're talking 10 times, Okay. A P90, you know what a good P90 costs. You know what the best P90 in the world costs. Okay. And if you bought 10 of them from me, we would give you a 35% dealer discount. Okay. So that means that you could, if you bought 10 P90s from me at once, you could get them for, and I'll just be very transparent about this. You could get them for, I think, I don't know, $78, something like that. Okay. And if you bought 100 of them from me, you'd probably end up getting them for somewhere around 60 to 65, somewhere right in there. If it was a really high volume number. Okay. The P90s that come in your Squiers, the P90s that come in all of your Chinese guitars, all those stuff, we're talking $5. You can get a P90 for $5. At volume, you can get them for about $3.50. Okay. So we're talking, again, 10 to 15 times the cost of what at volume now, not because I hear this all the time. Well, they can buy so many of them that they get them cheap, so it doesn't matter. That is not true. At volume, we're talking still a 10x delta between a P90 that kind of works, at least it works, and a good one. Fret wire, 7 to 10 times depending on the material. Because the way they buy fret wire actually is by the pound, or for you folks who use Androids, by the kilogram. So when we start talking about, it comes in a big spool, like these big spools, and it's a wire, right? So it comes in a big spool. And they buy it by the pound or the kilogram. And so you're still talking 7 to 10 times. And when we talk about the quality of fret wire, now this is an interesting one, because the quality of fret wire, you may not know this if you've not played an inexpensive guitar versus a really good quality guitar side by side. And you've not experimented with this over a period of time. But if you play a Squier, okay, Squiers are great. They're awesome, right? We're not talking bad about any guitar, really. We're just looking at the differences between them. So this is not better or worse. This is just the differences between them. Because, I mean, Squiers are amazing, right? We all know that. They're great. They're, in fact, they're a fantastic value, and they're a great entry point into the brand. However, the quality of the fret wire is not as good. It's softer. It is a cheaper material. It does not cost as much to manufacture, and it is less per kilogram or pound, depending on what phone you use, literally making a huge difference in the cost of guitars over a scaled period of time, or scaled numbers. Nuts. Nuts are harder to find the actual delta, because this is where bulk can really come into play. Basically, you could be anywhere from 3 times to 5 times to 10 times, depending on the volume and the material, right? Because everybody uses something a little different. Some people use ABS, some people use bone, some people will use Tusk, which is the brand name, but some sort of, synthetic, but not plastic nut, right? So self-lubricating something, right? So there's a lot of variation in there, right? So you could be all over the place for nuts. Same thing with tuners and bridges, depending on the style of bridge. But let's just take a regular, like a Telecaster style hardtail, or let's take, I'll give you an example, a good example, like a hip shot hardtail bridge, which I'm very familiar with because I've got these Texas Toast guitars. And then a very cheap hardtail bridge that comes on, any number of import guitars. There again, you're looking at a 10x delta between. So if this one costs, $100, this one literally costs $10. But that's not usually what they cost. Usually it's like $30, and to the dealer at volume, it's usually like $30 or $50 to $3 or $5 for the cheap ones. Now, probably the most expensive part and this is going to blow your mind. Probably the most expensive part of a guitar. In fact, you know what? I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most expensive part of a guitar? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to put your comments in there because I really want to know what you think the most expensive part of a guitar is. And we don't have any, Jeopardy music to play or anything, but let's think about that for a second. So we've obviously got the wood of the body, we've got the wood of the neck, we've got the fretboard, we've got the electronics in their various pieces, we've got the miscellaneous hardware like the tuners, etc. We've got the pickups. Somebody mentioned the pickups. Somebody mentioned the finish. Somebody mentioned the wood. What do you think it is? Switches. Let's see. Now Jim mentioned labor, but we've not talked about labor yet. And I've learned some things about labor today that are very, very interesting that we'll talk about. Let's see. Shipping of raw products and final assembly. That's an interesting one too. We'll get into that actually as well. In fact, I'm going to write that down to not forget that because I do have the kind of unseen costs, materials, management, and that kind of stuff. But I want to write one word down here and let's see. Sorry, I'm writing some stuff down that I'm remembering. Okay. Has to do with neck frets. I would say labor. So we're leaving labor largely out of this at the moment. Okay. So what we're really talking about now is cost of goods. Not what I mean by that is the part, right? Like, so this piece of plastic, this little piece of metal ring, this little clip right here, whatever, it doesn't matter. This cup, the cup, the finish on there, the laser, like whatever it is, any of that stuff. I'm going to say the pickups, those cost twice as much as the body. You would be way incorrect. Okay. It's the finish. Finish on a guitar is the most expensive part of building a guitar. More than the wood, more than the electronics, it is the finish. Here's why. Because materials, think about this. You never see, for the most part, nitrocellulose finishes on lower end guitars. The reason is because of I think the term they call it is in the lingo, like internally, I think they call it fallout. And what that is it's the amount of stuff that has to be redone. The bottom line is this. The finish takes the most time, it takes the most man hours, and it is a very expensive material. So we were talking about no labor, but I guess to be really fair with ourselves and to be really, honest about this, I don't want to mislead, I guess. So I guess you would have to put labor in there a little bit. However, finish is still, even in the Indonesian factories, the Chinese factories, etc., the most expensive part of the guitar, materials and time-wise, even if you're doing it with a robot. And it has to do with the amount of time that it takes to make sure that they're all right and the materials that go into it and the time that it takes to actually get the material on the guitar. And that could be preparation of the guitar. That also could fall all the way back to wood selection, which we're going to get to in a minute. So finish is the most expensive part, which is super interesting. Good thing for Gibson that have non-existent QC, everything goes out the door. That would also be incorrect. That really would. It would be absolutely incorrect, and I'll tell you some stuff why I know that. 2K acrylic is expensive AF. You're not lying, dude. A gallon of 2K acrylic is not cheap anymore. I was just talking to or corresponding with a guy that I know that makes his entire living making custom guitars, and he employs a bunch of people. And
I want to say that the clear that they use in the last 2 years has gone up 4 times, something like that. So, stuff is really expensive. Then why not use more natural finishes? I'll tell you why. Because you won't buy them. You won't buy them. You want a shiny guitar. End of story. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with giving. It's not about the cheapness of the product, okay? There's a mentality of guitar players who say, please build it cheaper because I want it cheaper. And that is just not the way the world works. I don't want them to build them cheaper. I don't want them to have only satin finishes available. I don't want them to have only whatever guitar finish available. I want my choices. I want fancy stuff. I want shiny guitars. I want all those things. And I want to pay for them because I want them. And those things should be available to everyone. Okay? Where it gets sticky is for the people who say, I want all the guitars that I want to be affordable to me. That's not anybody else's fault but you. I mean, really. So it's just a sense of entitlement that just doesn't need to exist, really. Natural is harder if you have to have a perfect blank. Okay, so let's talk about that. This is really cool. So let me just say, the guy that I was talking to on the phone today, I've known him for a few years now. We've done a bunch of projects together. He's a good friend of mine. He's really cool. He is responsible for, if you own a Gibson guitar, if you own a Fender guitar, if you own a Martin guitar, PRS, chances are you are playing, if you've bought it in the last, foreseeable past, that doesn't make sense. In the recent past, like let's say you bought a guitar in the last 4 or 5 years. Chances are you are playing a piece of wood that the guy that I was talking to is responsible for sourcing from some part of the world through some mill and then getting it to the maker. Okay? He does this for a lot of people and so has a lot of insight on how this works. And it's such an interesting thing. Valid point. You're never going to see a low budget Alembic. Nope, that's right. So let's talk wood. Wood is so fun to talk about because people get so bent about it. When we look at a piece, something I did not know, okay? Your vehicle is ready for pickup. Of course it is. Something I did not know is that, let's take rosewood, for example. A real rosewood fretboard that is a grade A rosewood fretboard that Fender or Gibson or PRS would use costs the same, more or less, give or take a little, but more or less, no matter where it is in the world. So if you go to China and you buy a Chinese guitar that is $200 and it says it has a rosewood fretboard, that is not the same piece of wood or the same quality of wood that is on a Fender, a Gibson, or a PRS. The more expensive guitars have quality controls by which they will not even buy a piece of wood if it has mineral deposits, any kind of pinholes, blah, 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 these sorts of things. Now, they may use them in their other stuff like Squires and stuff, but that falls under a completely different thing, okay? So we'll get to that in a minute because that's also very fascinating. So when you buy an SG, when you buy a Les Paul, you're buying a piece of wood that has been selected not only by the brand from a particular part of the world and shipped there, but you've also bought a piece of wood that is free of this, and this, and is ways between this and this, okay? So for a Les Paul example, for example, that is a different selection of mahogany than an SG. It may even come from two different parts of the world, but it's real mahogany. Okay. There are many, 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 many guitar brands. He told me some specifics. I do not feel comfortable saying them out loud because I don't want to. But there are many guitar brands who say they're using mahogany, for example, and it's just not. Rosewood, for example. Let's get back to rosewood. So rosewood costs X amount of dollars per board foot. Okay. Whether you buy it in India, whether you buy a grade A piece of rosewood that goes on that Les Paul right there. Okay. That Les Paul fretboard costs the same whether you buy it in China, whether you buy it in India, whether you buy it in Africa, whether you buy it in Europe, whether you buy it in the United States, whether you buy it in Canada or South America. It doesn't matter, because there is basically a market price for rosewood per board foot that is basically predominant over the entire world. Now, you may have to deal with shipping and that sort of stuff depending on where it comes from. Like, like if you've got to get it from this part of the world and go all the way over there, right? So there's some little variance there. However, it is sold as a commodity at a market value. So if you buy a guitar from, Firefly, and it has a rosewood fretboard on it, that is not the same quality of rosewood that goes into the guitars that we spend $3,000 for. There's a reason why an Eastwood costs more than a Firefly, but they're both made in China. It's because they're using grade A materials. Okay. Now, the same thing can happen with mahogany. Mahogany is weird because mahogany there's really only, there's a bunch of different, you can say there's a bunch of different kinds of mahoganies, but when it really comes down to it, there's only a couple that you can really actually call mahogany. Okay. I did not know this till today, but there are courts for biology. So if you're in Europe and you have a mahogany guitar and it is not mahogany, you can get taken to court and get sued for misrepresenting your product in Europe. So it could be NITO, it could be all kinds of other stuff, right? That they call mahogany, but they are not. And this happens for the most part in the Far East. Okay. Some of the bigger companies, this is why they will say a Telecaster is NITO or, Sapele or something like that, because these pieces of wood are not actually mahogany. And they can get in trouble for saying that they are when they are not, which is really interesting. That's a really interesting thing I did not know till today. I knew that they were swapping out parts and swapping out woods, but I didn't know that you could actually, like in certain countries, I guess it makes sense that it's true. Duh. But I had never really stopped to think about it, I guess I should say, that you could actually be held accountable for those things, sued for that sort of things, to the point that you would be Eastman instead of Eastwood. Yeah, that's what I meant. Eastman, whatever. We get it. Too long-winded. Gotta go, bro. See ya. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. So it's similar to how a company like Rolls-Royce or Ferrari source the leather for their cars. The cows can't be anywhere that they'll have bug bites on them, or next to a barbed wire fence, for example. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there are also some legal things too. So check this out. A piece of rosewood that is grown and sourced in Indonesia and in the Far East, okay? All rosewood, all real rosewood, has to have a CITES certification, okay? Which means it has to, there has to be a whole paper trail for it. to figure out that it came from somewhere and that it's legally sourced and et cetera, et cetera. And they have to be able to actually like spot check it and scientifically check it to make sure that nobody's lying. This all incurs a cost. Okay. So rosewood that has no CITES certification is approximately 50% cheaper than wood that is. But what that means is that if it's not CITES certified, it means that it cannot be exported outside the country where it was manufactured. So what that means also is that if you have an Indonesian guitar with a rosewood fretboard on it, you can only buy it as a completed product, not as a part. If that makes sense. So you cannot buy a unethically sourced rosewood fretboard, but you can buy an unethically sourced rosewood fretboard as part of a guitar in a finished product. This is a legal loophole that many of the Far East countries use to put rosewood on their cheap guitars because they know that they do not have CITES certification. Therefore, they source them within their own countries, they build them into the guitar, and then they can sell them. But that also means that you're buying bloody rosewood. I mean, that's what you're doing. I mean, you can be fine with that. I don't care. You do whatever you want. Most of the time when they say it's mahogany, it's sapele and kaya. So there's a bunch of different stuff. Oakum is another one. There's probably like 15 or 20 woods that are being used right now. I couldn't think of all of them off the top of my head. Otherwise I'd list them for you, but he gave me a big list today. Just kind of over the phone. So I didn't get a chance to write them down. But there's a big list of woods that people are using and calling it mahogany. Okay. And so that's the thing. The only reason we bring all this up, and I know that the guy that thinks I'm too long-winded doesn't have the patience to figure this out, but so is that the loophole HB uses? We'll get into Harley Benton in a minute. So we bring this all out because a lot of folks will say, well, how come this guitar costs $2,500 and this one costs this much? And they're basically the same. As you can see, they're not. The guitars are not the same, right? We haven't even talked about labor. We're literally talking about cost of parts. And so when you have a guitar that can be built for 1/10 the price of another one just in cost of parts, you could start to see the delta between where materials come from. And this is not even to have the conversation about whether any of those differences in materials matter. They matter to me. I don't care about the tone part of it. I care that my wood, okay, that sounded bad. I care that the wood in my guitar came from somewhere that was ethically sourced. That matters to me. It might not matter to you. It's totally fine. I don't judge anybody. But for me, that matters. So I'm going to spend the money to make sure that I get wood that is correct, right? And ethically sourced. I don't like the earth, being raped if there's a choice that I can make about it. Some things you can't make a choice, right? Like where your iPhone comes from. Although, he told me some stuff about that too. Pretty interesting. Anyway, long conversation today. And the reason we don't get into labor, we'll get into it in a little bit. I'll tell you a couple of things, but I don't like to get into labor because that gets into a whole bunch of politics stuff. But the bottom line is these parts are different. And if that matters to you, then you should have the ability to make a decision for the guitar that you want to purchase. And so when when a guitar player, and guitar players seem to be the only ones that do this, complain about how much something costs. Usually it's because you're the one that can't afford it. Duh. And that's fine. You can buy whatever you want, but just understand where it comes from. And so that you are educated. And to tell you the truth, a podcast like this and the time that we put into something like this is not actually, and this might be hard pill to swallow, not actually for the folks that buy cheap guitars. This podcast is for the people who want to understand where their $3,500 is going, right? If you're a person who has been on the fence about, is this guitar worth it? Because it looks kind of the same. I'm not encouraging you to buy a more expensive guitar. I'm just hoping that you can understand the delta between the two and then decide whether those things are important to you or not. A lot of these things are important to me. Some of them aren't, right? I don't care if a guitar has a $200 bridge on it. I don't care. I don't want to strip out and stuff. So like, I don't want it to be the ultra cheapest, but like, I don't care what the trem block is made of most of the time. There's certain things I don't care, right? I honestly don't care what it's made of wood wise, as long as it's legal. So when you talk about wood stuff, all the other stuff coming from other parts of the world, Indonesia, for example, even PRS, okay? I dare you to strip your paint off of your PRS Silver Sky SE and see what's underneath. It ain't gonna be a one-piece body, I'll tell you that. And that's not actually poplar. That's cottonwood, which is a byproduct. The poplar that is in your PRS Silver Sky SE is a byproduct of the cottonwood that they use for laminate cores, fancy way of saying plywood, that isn't good enough for plywood, that becomes the leftover pieces basically, or the stuff that's, anyway, long and short of it is, it's not plywood, so you can use it for a guitar. How about that? Crazy thing you learn on a Tuesday. That's where the poplar comes from. The maple in a lot of your Indonesian guitars, Chinese guitars, stuff like that, is actually Canadian. So Canada has this weird thing. This is the only, like, Canadians are actually pretty nice, except they're kind of mean about this. So they really, really sell maple super cheap. Okay. And because the shipping companies, so if you have a bunch of maple and you're in Canada and you want to ship it to the United States, it's more expensive to ship it to the United States than it is to ship it to China and Indonesia, because all of the shipping companies, like the actual ships, like the stuff that all your Amazon products come over in, and iPhones and stuff, they don't want to send them back empty. So they offer really, really cheap rates to people to put stuff to go back to China. Well, and to Indonesia in general, east to eastern part of the world. So what they do is they fill up these containers with maple from Canada. And it's actually cheaper to buy the maple from Canada, get it to Indonesia, make it into a guitar neck, put it on a guitar, and ship it back to the United States than it is to actually get the maple from Canada and bring it to the United States and put it in a guitar. Weird. Super weird. But that is true. That's a real thing. I learned that today. Could not believe it. Super, super crazy. Super crazy deal. Let's see. Which is why I do not trust. Let's see. What China has done to call legal. Yeah. So, let me give you a couple of interesting things about. Okay. How about this? Here's another question for you, and see if you know the answer. What do you think is the least profitable guitar for Fender, Gibson, and PRS line of guitars? How about that? What do you think is the least profitable line of guitars for Fender, Gibson, and PRS? What do you think? Put that in the comments. And tell you something, while you're putting that in there, I'll tell you something really super interesting. One of the reasons Indonesia is so cheap to manufacture, this is something I learned today. I didn't know. But my buddy, he goes over there a lot because he works with all these companies. is right now, gas in Indonesia is $1 a gallon. Okay. It was 50 cents a gallon for a long time. They make their own fuel there. Cost of energy is the basis for cost of everything. So their government has decided to basically it's a state-run fuel, more or less. So they control the cost of fuel and they keep it extremely low. And it does two things. It makes the manufacturing very low because that's how you make your electricity. That's how you make all your other energy, right? But it also incentivizes the folks that live there. And Indonesia as a whole is about the same size, 340 million people. It's a little smaller population-wise than the United States, but it's pretty close. And they only have to pay $1 a gallon for gas. So it incentivizes them to work. And they can make a living wage, even though the labor costs are lower. But because of all of that, their cost of living is lower too. Cost of energy is lower, driving lots of manufacturing to Indonesia. So super, super interesting. It's a super interesting thing. All right, what's the least? All right, here we go. Everybody thinks they're higher end guitars. Oh, we got some cheap guitars in there. We got some custom shop guitars in there. This is a trick question. I'm going to say custom shop is not a trick question. Their higher end probably has the least margin. Could be the low end because those are gateway axes to get to the more expensive ones. You're on the right track. Likely the Step Up series, like the Fender Ultra, Gibson Custom, and PRS Fiore, Squire Affinity. All right. It's kind of all over the place. Their most profitable are their mid-grade sub 1,000 guitars, mass manufactured with CNC machines, etc. Okay. Their least profitable guitars, Squire, SE, Epiphone. They have the least margin. The reason an Indonesian guitar, you can get an Indonesian guitar and have it be so good is because if you take it out of the box and have to look at it, there's a mathematical formula, okay? So remember we talked about this whole thing where you look at all these guitars and you decide what the percentage of stuff that has to go back and redone is? It's actually lower for import guitars because the profit margins are so tight that if you were to have to spend $50 or $100 on every guitar, which is what it would be, to pay a guy to take it out, to fix a problem, to box it back up, to tape it all back up and make it look all good, you would be $50 or $100 into every guitar because of the time and, you know, all the cost that goes into that. But it would be $50 or $100. That would soak all the profit margin out of the guitar. They make almost nothing on import guitars. Okay. They sell the most of them though. They have to. Otherwise, it's a purely a volume thing. And the only reason they do it, Jim Woodard brought it up earlier. The only reason they do it is called in a lot of other industries a loss leader. And what that means is it's the lowest profit margin, but it is the thing that introduces people to the brand. I've been preaching this for 10 years and people don't get it. If you buy a $200 guitar from Fender or from Gibson, you know, Epiphone, or the cheapest PRS is probably what, $600-700? That's an entry point into the brand. They don't care really. They got to make money, but they don't care really about the profit margin in that guitar as much as getting you involved in the brand. 100%. That is the number one motivation for a less expensive guitar. It is not profit. It's long-term profit for long-term profit as a result of the introduction to the brand and hopefully the long-term relationship that you build with the brand. I don't do this. Our pickups cost what they cost. We do not have a made in China version, right, to get people into the brand. But I will tell you how we do it. Every brand does this. I'll tell you how we do it. Merch, right? So like this hat, we also sell lizard spit products. I don't make that much money on that stuff. Let's see, lizard spit products, I guess. Oh, all the parts. So pots and caps and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of actually more of a pain to do than I actually make any money on it. But what it does is the same exact thing that an Epiphone or a Squire or a PRS SE does. It makes my website more searchable. It makes it to where people find me. And then they click around and they go, oh, you also do this other stuff, right? The most profitable guitars at Fender are Fender Custom Shop. Here's the thing that'll blow your mind. The dealer makes more money on every guitar than Fender does themselves. I'll just let that one sit for a second. The dealers make more money than Fender does themselves on each guitar. Now, the dealers might not agree with you on that because they feel probably right about now that they're getting hurt. And I understand why, because this is why many of the bigger brands are going to more direct sales. Here's the problem with direct sales. Direct sales mean that you have to have the customer service to back it up. Okay. One of the ways that Harley Benton, one of the ways that Firefly, one of the ways all of those Chinese brands, besides the entire political side of it, we don't even want to get into, and the illegal wood and all that stuff. So that's all true. All those things are actually true. I'm not making this up. Okay. You've got illegal wood in your Harley Benton. Just going to tell you that. You're just going to have to deal with it. Besides all that, there's no customer service, right? So Thomann will provide some, but most of the stuff that you see on Amazon and whatever, those brands do not provide any kind of after the sale service. So if you buy a guitar on Amazon, you actually deal with Amazon. You don't deal with the brand. That's not always true, but what they're doing is they're counting on the fact that they're not going to have to fix anything. So Fender has to fix something, that's profit gone, right? So when you sell direct, you have to provide more of that. So, I mean, I do, right? So like if, I'll give you an example. Oh, let's see. I read an order wrong last week. Okay. And by accident. And I sent a guy, sorry, by the way, your stuff shipped today. I sent him a 3-way switch telly instead of a 4-way switch telly. That freaking sucks because I have to pay for the shipping coming back. I have to build the new one. I have to figure out, hopefully the old one will sell, which it probably will. But if it comes back damaged a little bit, or he didn't figure it out until he, partially installed it or something, I can't sell that as new. So there you go. I ate the whole thing. Plus I have to ship him a new one back, like all the time involved, texting him back and forth to figure all the stuff out, like all that stuff. It's all profit gone. They'll never get back. But I have to do that because I sell directly. And this is where it's a give and take. Like Fender and Gibson trying to sell directly, now they have to put in place the infrastructure to do that. It's just an interesting thing to think about. Let's see what else. Going through all this stuff. I guess that's the most of it. Here, let's go through these comments really quick. And if you don't think, I don't understand why people buy their relic style guitars with all the worn paint and scratches. I like a shiny new guitar. So I'll tell you why. I don't know why anybody else does it, but I'll tell you why I do it. And I'm very confident in this answer. You like shiny guitars, right? So that's cool. So that's why they make shiny guitars, so you can buy them. I like them too. I have a bunch of shiny guitars. I do. There are certain guitars that I want to feel a certain way. And people will say, well, you have to play it, blah, 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 blah. You know, I just did the video yesterday. I've had this one guitar, nitrocellulose finish. I've never cleaned it. I treat it kind of like crap on purpose because I want it to be beat up. Not beat up, but I want it to feel worn in. I play it all the time. I've had it for 4 years. It still friggin' looks brand new. When you take a guitar like a Fender Custom Shop Relic, okay, and well, let me say this. I have a friend. His name is Jim. Some of you in the comments know him. He has a 1957 Stratocaster that he has had since it was in new condition. He hasn't had it since 1957. I think he's had it since the mid 70s. But when he got it, it was like in brand new condition. He showed me pictures of it. It's beat to crap now. So from the 70s until now is what? Almost 50 years. Okay? That it took for that guitar to get to look the way it looks now. It looks amazing, by the way. It's really cool. And it's real. Like, he really played it. He gigged it every weekend. I bet he gigged it 3-4 times a week for 40 years, okay? To get it to look that way. Well, my age, if I buy a new nitrocellulose guitar, I don't have 4 years of time to play it to get it there. I don't play 2 gigs a week and beat around in bars like Jim beat that guitar around in bars for 40 years. I don't have that time, but I want it to feel that way. So I pay somebody else to do it so it feels the way I want it to feel and looks the way I want it to look because I don't have the time. And that's, to me, that's what it's for. And you could disrespect that all you want or say that that is cheating or whatever. Fine, I don't care. Whatever, dude. Like, yeah, it's cheating. But I had to pay the money because all those things take time. You know, I worked with John Cruz for a while on some stuff, and watching him, well, first of all, he wouldn't let you watch most stuff. Like, it's like super top secret. But all of the equipment that he had and all the stuff that he would do by hand and everything that he would do to relic a guitar, it is not free. They do not just drag it around behind a truck. Remember when we did that video and I took a guitar body and I drug it around behind my truck and it did not look relic, it just looked drug around behind the truck. That's all time, right? That's hours and hours and hours and hours. That's why there's years long waiting lists on that custom shop stuff that does that. Because it's time. All those things take time. Everything that you add to a basic guitar. So let's take a basic Telecaster. No, bad example. Let's take a Les Paul, whatever that Les Paul light thing is. The mahogany body one with the nitrocellulose finish, but there's no filler and you can see all the grain and stuff. And it's $1,500 and everybody complains because it's too expensive and it should be cheaper for what it is. Okay. First of all, any guitar that's made in the United States and costs $1,500, it's bargain. 100%. End of story. The conversation that we've had today, we could get into a whole bunch of other stuff beyond this, labor and all that stuff, and taxes and insurance and workman's comp and all the hidden costs that you don't want to know about because they exist. It's just the fact that the job that you have, you don't have to think about it. Okay. But the person that owns the business has to think about it. The guy you work for has to pay all that stuff. Okay. So that's why, you know, you work for $15 an hour and he charges $80 an hour to do whatever you're doing. because he has to pay for all that stuff. Okay, so all that stuff happens in the background. So now we have this guitar, right? And it's bumpy. It's not smooth. So now we have to put grain filler on it, okay? Probably a UV product of some sort so that you can do it in a production environment. I don't know how much that stuff costs a gallon, but I know that the light to do that is $5,000, okay? And all the robots and stuff to do it, thousands of dollars just for the grain filler. So we got to put that cost in there, okay? Then we got to do binding, which is, you've seen the videos. It doesn't just jump on there by itself, right? So you got to pay somebody for that. You got to pay somebody to buff it. You got to pay somebody, you got to pay for better everything, pickups and bridges and all the stuff we just talked about. Inlays don't just jump into a neck, right? They have to be machined. That's machine time. That's a $250,000 machine that has to run X amount of minutes a day to make itself worth it. So then if you slow the process down by 20%, 10%, let's say it takes 10 minutes to run a program and now it takes 12 minutes to run a program. You got to pay for that. All that stuff costs money. It's not just pushing a button, it's the cost of making it all go. So every time you add a feature to something, you have to pay for it somehow. And, you know, nothing's free. So these things don't just jump on a guitar by themselves. So you go from $1,500 for that very basic guitar to what is that thing? What is it, $3,200? Plus you got to pay that one, you got to pay the artist premium on top, and so that Slash gets some dough too. All those things cost money, all of it. And it all adds up. It's pretty neat. I think it's neat. I think it's really cool. I mean, I run a business, so I always look at this stuff. I look at everything. I mean, if you see me pick up a pen and go, I wonder how much it costs to make this little plastic part. I literally do that all the time. If I'm looking at, you know, a firearm, if I'm looking at a guitar, if I'm looking at a pocket knife, you know, people will flip out because this is a titanium pocket knife with a MagnaCut blade that costs more than a couple Harley Benz. Let's just say that. Why? Well, there's a reason. Everything. There's a reason for everything. People don't just pull these numbers out of their butts. You know, this stuff happens for a reason. And, you know, if a tuner ends up costing 15 cents more this year, you're going to feel that. You're just going to feel it. It's just how it works. It's kind of neat. I love looking at it. I love looking at all this stuff. I was talking to my buddy today and I'm like, please tell me more. Just tell me more about all these details, because it just gives me a better picture of what we're doing. It gives me a better picture of why things are cool. You know, I just think it's so cool. I love it. Absolutely love it. Let's see. Drag behind a truck. Yes, we did that. How about relic pickups? So I will tell you that Brandon Wound, Zach over there at Brandon Wound does a really nice job of aging pickups so that you can put them, like he'll rewind pickups. He'll do, so you can put them in an old guitar and they don't look new. Cause that kind of sucks actually. If you have like an old guitar and then you put these brand new pickups in, it doesn't really match. He has a really nice job of aging pickups. They're super cool. Brandon Wound pickups, talk to Zach. Why does he have a knife? You must be new here. Let's see. Yeah, man. Interesting topic today. Thanks so much. I need to go. Me too. Me too. It is time to go. This has been super fun. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We will see you tomorrow because I have the Spark 2 to unbox. I'm going to leave it in the box and hang out with y'all tomorrow as we do it. And that's going to be pretty neat. Well, maybe we'll make it make noise too. I don't know. I hope. See you tomorrow.